Princess of Wales pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation.
The decision came without celebration, warning, or room for negotiation. In a private chamber sealed from the wider palace, King Charles placed his signature beneath the most consequential family decree of his reign. With one final succession act, he formally crowned Catherine as the royal family's new queen, transferring to her the authority to guide the House of Windsor through whatever came next. But the silence after his announcement revealed that not everyone was prepared to accept her rise. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew everyone understood that the balance had broken. William sat beside Catherine, while Camilla and Princess Anne watched the king for doubt. None came. The final family succession act, a private decree assigning household leadership without altering the legal line to the throne, named Catherine the family's new queen and principal matriarch. It placed traditions, family unity, ceremonial direction, and the younger generation under her authority. The decision mattered because the House of Windsor faced a fragile transfer of power. Charles believed the family needed one trusted center before William inherited the crown, and he chose the woman whose calm had held rival loyalties together. Then he faced Catherine. From this moment, the family looks to you. Catherine did not reach for the document. Her hands remained folded as shock deepened. She understood that Charles was offering more than honor. He was admitting he could not carry the burden alone. William watched her, but his silence felt prepared. A glance between him and the monarch exposed the truth. The prince had known, had been consulted, and had supported the transfer without warning her. Camilla did not move. She had expected ceremonial planning, only to hear Catherine placed at the monarchy's center. The queen consort tightened when the words, "new queen of the family," settled. Her title remained, but her influence had shifted. She would now protect the dynasty, guide its children, and shape its private direction. Anne noticed one page hidden beneath Charles's hand. The princess asked why the final clause remained unread. He answered that it concerned authority once exercised by Camilla, and the room tightened. The queen consort pushed back her chair, looked at the king, and demanded to know whether her position had already been dismantled without consent. Charles offered no defense. He simply lifted his hand from the concealed page, and when Charles finally uncovered the last page, the title given to Catherine became only half the story. The other half concerned everything Camilla was about to lose. Behind the decree stood 4 people bound by duty, but divided by fear. Charles saw Catherine as the monarchy's safest future. William saw the recognition of a woman who had endured years of pressure without surrendering. Catherine saw an obligation that could consume the private life she had fought to protect. Camilla saw something far more threatening, proof that the family's future had been designed around her exclusion. Catherine left the chamber with the document still untouched. The new title had made her the family's principal matriarch, meaning the woman trusted to guide its private unity, traditions, and younger generation. That authority mattered because Charles feared another period of rivalry could tear the House of Windsor apart, while William knew the next era would need more than ceremony. It would need someone capable of calming disputes before they became wounds. William closed the sitting room door behind them and admitted that Charles had asked for his approval 3 weeks earlier. The prince explained that the king believed delay would give opponents time to weaken the decision before the coming family council, a formal meeting where senior royals examined major household matters. Catherine stared at him, then asked why he had allowed her to enter that room completely unprepared. William reached for her hand. She pulled it away. The movement was small, but the hurt behind it was not. He insisted secrecy had been demanded by the monarch, yet Catherine heard only that her husband had helped decide her future without trusting her with the truth. She had spent years preparing to support him, not to be raised above others before his accession, and exposed to resentment she had never invited. Camilla stood alone in the adjoining corridor, fighting the fear beneath her anger. The queen consort understood that household ceremonies, family gatherings, and private royal customs could now pass to Catherine. Worse, She sensed that Charles had judged her unable to preserve the dynasty. That thought wounded her more deeply than the loss of influence itself. Anne approached Catherine with controlled calm and offered a brief congratulations. The princess refused to say whether she had supported the decree, but her guarded expression revealed that she knew why Charles had acted. Catherine noticed the silence and understood that the decision had not been created simply to honor her. William finally admitted that one recent incident had forced the king's deadline. Charles believed waiting even a few more days would place the family's future at risk. Catherine looked back toward the closed chamber and realized someone's action had turned a private concern into an urgent act of succession. To understand why the king acted with such urgency, the family would have to return to one disastrous evening, the moment Charles stopped seeing delay as an option. The succession decree had not begun with legal language or careful planning. It began at a family banquet 6 weeks earlier, when a celebration intended to demonstrate unity collapsed into a private act of defiance. One conversation, overheard at the wrong moment, convinced Charles that the family's future was being shaped behind his back. From that night onward, Catherine's elevation was no longer an idea. It became an urgent necessity. Charles had watched the divisions grow for months. Camilla expected greater authority whenever he stepped away from daily duties, while William and Anne wanted major family decisions delayed until the future king could approve them. Family strategy meetings, private discussions where senior royals shaped household priorities, ceremonies, and responsibilities, had become quiet battlegrounds. Catherine repeatedly calmed the prince after bitter exchanges, and persuaded the princess to remain involved, when frustration pushed her toward withdrawal. The king saw that she was already holding the family together without title or reward. The banquet changed everything. Charles approached the Windsor library and heard Camilla speaking to 2 senior household figures behind a partly closed door. The queen consort insisted Catherine should be excluded from future strategy meetings until William became king. Giving her influence too early, she warned, would create 2 courts under one roof. Charles opened the door before she could continue. The advisors fell silent. The monarch looked at them, then at his wife, and asked whether decisions concerning Catherine were now being made without either him or William. Camilla answered that she was protecting the stability of his reign, but he heard an attempt to contain the woman the monarchy would soon need most. His disappointment was colder than anger. Anne found Catherine later that evening, and told her what had happened during a private conversation with no aides present. The princess expected outrage. Instead, Catherine asked whether Charles had been humiliated. Her concern for him, even after learning she had been targeted, moved Anne and confirmed why the king trusted her. Charles summoned his private secretary before leaving Windsor. He ordered the preparation of a family succession instrument, a private document used to assign internal royal authority, and demanded that it remain outside ordinary palace correspondence. He then asked Anne to witness the final act and challenge him if emotion had clouded his judgment. After reviewing the documented account of the banquet, she warned that delay would be more dangerous than action. Days before the signing, Camilla found a draft schedule carrying Catherine's name beside the words "formal investiture," meaning the ceremony that would officially grant her new authority. She finally understood what Charles was preparing. Armed with that discovery, Camilla entered the final meeting not to listen, but to stop the decree before Catherine could rise beyond her reach. The last page had barely been uncovered when restraint collapsed. Camilla stood before Charles with disbelief turning rapidly into fury, demanding to know when their marriage had become secondary to his plans for succession. Catherine remained frozen beside William, caught between respect for the king and horror at becoming the center of their conflict. Then Charles answered with a sentence that changed the temperature of the room. "This is not about choosing a wife, it is about saving a family." Charles lifted the concealed clause and read it without hesitation. All private authority over family ceremonies, disputes between generations, royal mentoring, and historic customs would pass from Camilla's office to Catherine's new household. A royal household meant the team and authority supporting a senior family member's official and private duties. The queen consort would keep her ceremonial dignity, but she would no longer hold the final voice in internal family matters. Catherine would become the recognized matriarch for the dynasty's next chapter. Camilla stepped around the table and faced the king directly. She asked whether the years spent defending him meant nothing. Charles remained seated until she accused Catherine of engineering the transfer. Then he rose. The monarch told her never to place responsibility for his decision on the woman he had chosen to protect. Catherine finally spoke. She said she had neither requested the title nor known it was coming. Her voice remained controlled, but emotion broke through when Camilla answered that accepting the decree still made her part of the humiliation. William moved between them and warned that his wife would not become a target for anger aimed at Charles. The future king's intervention made the fracture undeniable. Charles then returned to the banquet. He stated that he had personally heard Camilla attempt to exclude Catherine from future strategy meetings, private sessions where senior royals shape family responsibilities and priorities. The queen consort turned toward Anne, convinced the princess had built the case against her. Anne did not retreat. She explained that Charles had needed no persuasion. Her task had been to test whether the decree protected the institution or merely punished Camilla. After reviewing the documented account of the banquet and the succession papers, she concluded that Catherine's elevation was necessary even without the betrayal. Camilla refused to accept the verdict. She declared that one signature could not rewrite the family's hierarchy and demanded that the full royal council examine the act. Charles watched her carefully, because he had expected that challenge from the beginning. But the moment Camilla called for the council, she triggered the very mechanism Charles had quietly prepared to prove that his final act could not be overturned. Camilla believed the council would expose weakness in Charles's decree. Instead, it revealed how carefully the king had prepared for resistance. Behind Catherine's elevation stood a quiet alliance formed not through ambition, but through a shared fear that the monarchy could fracture after Charles. William held the future. Anne held the family's trust. Yet the final authority remained with a man determined to make one last decision before hesitation became his legacy. Charles paused outside the council chamber, with William beside him. The king asked whether history would accuse him of acting from anger toward his wife. The prince chose his words carefully. He said history would judge whether the family became stronger, not whether the decision kept everyone comfortable. Supporting Catherine still wounded him because it meant opposing Camilla, the woman his father had defended for years, but he would not sacrifice his wife's future to preserve a peace that was already false. The council gathered in silence. The final family succession act concerned the monarchy's private hierarchy, the internal system governing duties, ceremonies, and family leadership, rather than the constitutional line to the throne. As head of the House of Windsor, Charles could assign those responsibilities without changing who would inherit the crown. Senior advisors had already confirmed the transfer could begin immediately. Anne placed her copy of the decree on the table. The princess told the assembled figures that she had questioned Charles more severely than any opponent in that room. She had tested his motives, examined the risks, and challenged every weakness. Yet every answer returned to Catherine's record of restraint, loyalty, and service. William supported the same conclusion because he trusted her judgment when pressure threatened to divide the family. Camilla's supporters offered one final compromise. They proposed dividing authority, allowing the queen consort to retain control over senior traditions while Catherine guided younger royals. The plan sounded balanced, but it would create two rival households, each claiming influence over the same family. Catherine entered when summoned and rejected it immediately. She said she would rather surrender the new title than accept an arrangement designed to produce conflict. Her refusal to grasp for power silenced several critics. Charles looked around the chamber and declared that her willingness to walk away was precisely why she deserved to lead. The monarch signed a confirmation order, a final instruction making the transfer active, and commanded officials to begin before sunset. Camilla then received notice that the first ceremony under Catherine's authority would take place the following morning without her leadership. The debate had ended, but the punishment of reality was only beginning, and by dawn every corridor of the palace would know where power had moved. There was no grand announcement inside the palace when Catherine's authority began. There were simply new instructions, altered schedules, and doors that no longer opened in the same direction. By sunrise, aides who once carried family decisions to Camilla were walking toward Catherine's rooms instead. The transfer was orderly, almost gentle. That made it more devastating. Power had not been torn away in public. It had quietly stopped arriving. Catherine's household immediately took responsibility for family ceremonies, mentoring younger royals, private anniversary observances, and disputes between senior and junior branches of the dynasty. A royal household meant the team and authority supporting a senior family member's duties. The change mattered because whoever controlled those responsibilities shaped not only tradition, but also which voices guided the family's future. Her first duty was to lead preparations for a private remembrance ceremony honoring the late queen, a role Camilla had expected to direct. Camilla received the revised program at breakfast. An aide placed it beside her untouched tea, and the queen consort saw that her name had vanished from the line marked Family Lead. Catherine's name stood there instead. She read the page twice, folded it carefully, and dismissed the room without touching her meal. Once alone, she removed the brooch chosen for the ceremony and returned it to its case. The decree was no longer symbolic. The family had already reorganized itself around another woman. Catherine entered the planning meeting without triumph. When advisors called her the family's new queen, she asked them to use her name until formal protocols, the agreed rules governing titles and duties, were settled. Her discomfort revealed the burden behind the honor. William then discovered that Camilla had declined the ceremony. The prince warned Charles that her absence would expose the family's fracture and invite questions about the marriage. Charles understood why the ceremony mattered beyond remembrance. If the senior women appeared divided, every younger royal would inherit that bitterness, and every future gathering would become another contest over loyalty, rank, and belonging inside the wounded royal family. Charles went to her privately. The king asked Camilla to attend, but offered no return of authority. She told him that appearing beneath Catherine's leadership would mean accepting her own replacement. He answered that her absence would not stop the ceremony or reverse the transfer. Then he left. Camilla closed the door with both hands and held her grief until she was alone. Yet Catherine, hearing of the refusal, changed the ceremonial order. She requested a private meeting before the family gathered. That request would create the first moment in which the two women faced each other without Charles, William, advisors, or titles standing between them. No council could repair what had broken between them. No decree could soften the humiliation, and no carefully written statement could erase years of rivalry. Catherine understood that if the family entered its new era with Camilla isolated and furious, her first act as queen would become a permanent wound. So she went alone. No William, no Charles, no aides. Just two women, one carrying new authority and the other mourning the loss of it. Catherine entered without papers, speeches, or witnesses. She had not come to renegotiate the King's Act. She wanted to stop the transfer from becoming a campaign of humiliation that would divide Charles from his wife and poison every future family gathering. Camilla expected a demand for submission or carefully rehearsed sympathy. The queen consort had prepared herself to reject both. Catherine placed the removed brooch on the table between them. She explained that an aide had found it beside the abandoned ceremony program and believed it should be returned. A remembrance ceremony was a private royal gathering honoring someone who had died, and this one mattered because it would become the first test of the family's new order. "It deserves to be worn by the person who chose it," she said. Camilla looked at the brooch, but did not touch it. She asked whether Catherine truly expected gratitude after accepting a title built from her diminished authority. The younger royal answered that refusing the position would not restore trust between Camilla and Charles. It would only leave the family without clear leadership when rivalry was already threatening to split it. Catherine then admitted what Camilla had never expected to hear. During their private conversation, she revealed that the new authority frightened her. She feared becoming hardened by power, failing William, disappointing the children, and proving the king wrong. Her honesty disturbed the image of a calculating rival who had waited patiently to take her place. Catherine asked Camilla to attend the ceremony beside Charles, not beneath her, and not as a ceremonial subordinate. She also offered her a continuing advisory role in the family's charitable and cultural traditions. An advisory role meant she could guide and counsel without holding the final decision. The authority itself, however, would remain unchanged. Camilla sat in silence before admitting that the decree had wounded her. She also confessed that excluding Catherine from strategy meetings had been a mistake born from fear. Then she lifted the brooch and fastened it to her dress. It was not forgiveness, but it was acceptance. Before Catherine left, Camilla warned that peace inside one room could not control the reaction outside the gates. By the time the palace released the announcement, the family had reached a fragile peace, but the country was about to decide what Catherine's new crown meant to them. The announcement reached the public shortly after midday, and within minutes, the title dominated every broadcast, newspaper site, and conversation beyond the palace gates. Some saw Catherine's elevation as the natural recognition of a future already taking shape. Others saw it as a brutal rejection of Camilla. But amid the arguments, one moment outside Buckingham Palace captured the national mood more powerfully than any commentator could manage. Charles's statement confirmed that the final Family Succession Act had taken effect. The document, a private order assigning leadership inside the royal household without changing the legal line to the throne, named Catherine the family's new queen and principal guardian of its unity, traditions, and younger generations. Palace officials stressed that the decision strengthened continuity around William and his wife, while preserving Camilla's ceremonial dignity. Yet the careful language could not hide the truth. Authority had moved. An evening newspaper appeared with Catherine beside the king across its entire front page. The headline read, "The King's Final Choice, Catherine to lead the family." Broadcasters repeated those words live, as people outside Buckingham Palace lifted copies above the crowd. Near the gates, an elderly woman raised a small Union flag and told a television reporter, "He has chosen the person who makes the future feel safe." Applause began around her and spread along the railings. Camilla still drew sympathy. Commentators questioned whether Charles had acted cruelly by transferring family authority while remaining married to her. Some members of the public felt uneasy watching one queen rise through another woman's loss. The queen consort had retained her title, but every discussion now centered on what she no longer controlled. Catherine watched the coverage privately with William. The future king expected relief, perhaps even pride, but she appeared overwhelmed. When applause from outside reached the room through an open window, she asked him to close it. To her, the sound felt less like praise than expectation. William obeyed, and reminded her that the country was responding to years of service, not a single title. Attention then shifted to the remembrance ceremony, a private gathering honoring the late queen. The public waited to see whether Camilla would attend or expose the family's division through her absence. Then the palace doors opened. She walked beside Charles wearing the brooch Catherine had returned. Several steps behind them, William accompanied his wife. The arrangement honored the marriage that remained, and the succession that had changed. Charles suddenly asked to speak. Those closest to the king understood that he was about to explain his final choice. As Charles stepped forward, the arguments fell silent, because the man who had divided opinion with one signature was finally ready to deliver the verdict himself. Charles did not speak of winners or losers. He spoke of endurance. Before his family and a watching nation, the king declared that Catherine had not been elevated because she demanded authority, but because she had carried responsibility long before anyone gave it a name. His final succession act was not a rejection of the past, it was his answer to the future. A future he now believed could survive only through trust, discipline, and service. Charles explained that Catherine's new position recognized leadership already proven through family crises, private divisions, and years of pressure. The title of the family's new queen meant she would guard the House of Windsor's unity, traditions, and younger generations while preparing to stand beside William in the monarchy's next era. It did not change the constitutional line to the throne. It formalized a duty she had carried quietly, without demanding reward. The king then turned away from his prepared remarks. He looked directly at Catherine and told her that leadership was safest in the hands of someone who understood its cost. She lowered her head as emotion overcame restraint, then lifted her eyes to meet his. William watched his father recognize the woman who had shared every burden of his public life. When she returned to his side, the prince took her hand, repairing the wound created by his earlier secrecy. Charles also acknowledged Camilla's service and the pain caused by change. The queen consort did not smile, and she did not pretend the transfer had been easy. Yet she gave Catherine a deliberate nod before joining the family tribute. That gesture preserved her dignity beside the monarch, while confirming that the new hierarchy would no longer be challenged. Anne delivered the final confirmation. The princess addressed Catherine by her new family title, ending any doubt that the senior royals would honor the decree. Catherine answered not with instructions, but with inclusion. She asked everyone to stand together for the remembrance tribute, a private act honoring the late queen, and made unity her first exercise of authority, with courage, patience, and grace. The consequence was clear. Camilla remained beside Charles, but Catherine became the dynasty's emotional and strategic center. William gained a partner, formally empowered to prepare the family for their shared future. The crown had not come through conquest, it had come through endurance. And as the family stood together beneath Catherine's quiet leadership, Charles's final choice became complete. He had not merely named a new queen, he had given the monarchy a future it could finally believe in. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.